Hey everybody, this is Dan Selcke, the editor-in-chief at winteriscoming.net, and I am joined today by Cheryl Wassenaar, the editor at Culturess. Hey Cheryl, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Dan?
I'm really well. And we're here to discuss a topic that you might have thought about if you're a Song of Ice and Fire fan or a Game of Thrones fan. The Song of Ice and Fire books, monstrous fantasy tomes, beloved by many.
Tome is a good word.
Yeah, revered by many. The question we're going to talk about today is, are they too long? Because Cheryl, I mean,
Tough
people
question.
are busy.
They are.
They have their lives, they have their jobs and their dogs and their cats and their families and stuff like that. They might not have time to read a voluminous fantasy tome as successful as they are. And there are complaints. Like, George R. R. Martin, the author, gets complaints not only that they're taking too long or they can't be understood.
Right.
People say they don't even have time to read them.
And I mean, it's a fair complaint. They are long. You can drop them and, crush whatever may be beneath the book.
Absolutely. At present, they're about, just for reference, about 1,770,000 words.
Wow.
The 5 that are yet released.
Yeah.
2 on the way, hopefully.
Fingers crossed. I mean, it's a fair complaint. They are long, they're sprawling, but it really is kind of symptomatic of the high fantasy genre. Like, it's not just an issue with George R. R. Martin and A Song of Ice and Fire.
Right.
It's, The Wheel of Time is huge and long and sprawling.
Which is apparently over 4 million words.
It's over 4 million words. I didn't know that, but I believe
finished.
it. It
over
is finished.
Double the length of the 5 books Song of Ice and Fire released so far.
Yeah, it is finished, but it had to be finished by someone else. Brandon Sanderson finished after Robert Jordan passed away. So I think it's really more symptomatic of the fact that high fantasy always has this tendency to build these really big, sprawling worlds, and they want to cover every inch of this world that they've created, and it turns into this huge mess. I mean, this is kind of the problem.
Mess. That is a big word.
Would you
consider Song of Ice and Fire a mess?
I mean, once George R. R. Martin had to split book 4 into 2 to publish them.
Actually, yeah, that's a good point. It is a bit of a messy situation.
Messy, yes. Messy is more the word I would use rather than mess. I don't need a ton of comments on the internet after this one.
No, it's fine.
But,
be nice.
Please. But I think it's really this tendency. It's, like I said, it's not really Martin's fault. It's the fault of the genre specifically, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, I don't think we should say it's not Martin's fault. He is the writer here.
That's true.
He can choose to pare things back if he wants.
But he doesn't.
On this track, how do you respond to something like, okay, so it's the fault of the genre.
Yeah.
But I think we can agree that the progenitor of current high fantasy is Lord of the Rings.
It is.
Way back when.
Can definitely lay that down there.
And all 3 of those books, and those books are probably the most beloved certainly most well-known high fantasy books out there. And I know people say Song of Ice and Fire might be taking it, or it's like a modern Lord of the Rings, but I'm not sure we have enough distance to know that for sure.
Yeah, those comparisons that George R. R. Martin is the American Tolkien are a little premature, I think.
I mean, yeah, we'll look at that in posterity in several years when that happens. But Lord of the Rings, all 3 of the books are just shy of 500,000 words, whereas A Song of Ice and Fire is, as I said, like well over 1 million, approaching 2 million, and it's not even done yet.
And it's not even done.
I mean, The Wheel of Time, over 4 million. You are an avid reader of fantasy and other books.
I am.
And you must have read, I'm sure you've read other series that are voluminous to the point well beyond 500,000 words.
I have.
So if Lord of the Rings is the progenitor of all this, I mean, then can you really blame it when it, in comparison, was pretty economical when it comes to its word count?
I think maybe what happened was, sure, Tolkien is the progenitor of all these tropes and all that, but I think...
Your orcs, your elves, your medievalists, but not really medieval settings that go on to this day.
Huge backstories that last thousands of years. I mean, how many ancestors does Aragorn
Maps.
have?
Gotta have the maps.
Must have maps.
Fantasy maps are everywhere.
Oh, Lord. I learned how to read a map from a fantasy book.
Did you really?
A bit, yeah, actually. I mean, so sure, the Lord of the Rings is kind of the progenitor of these tropes. But I think what happened was a lot of authors kind of looked at Lord of the Rings and said, I want to go beyond that. And beyond, in this case, seems to be in the case of word count. and building in more characters and trying to go for more moral ambiguity, among other things.
Oh, certainly, because Tolkien wasn't really, he was more of a black and white kind of guy.
A little bit, yeah.
Morally speaking.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of where the issue, to put it lightly, kind of came from, was kind of, or at least part of the cause of this whole high fantasy is stereotypically huge. It's kind of that looking at Tolkien and saying, I want to do more.
Right, because you can't just, I mean, you have the,
you can't just
how to make your mark
right,
to build on that.
Right.
I mean, well, here's another question for you. Is it a bad thing? I mean, because we're talking about, are they too long? I mean, do you enjoy, I'm sure fans enjoy having a huge body of material to just sink their teeth into.
And that itself is not a bad thing necessarily. I just worry that this desire to have such big, long, heavy tomes can lead to not great storytelling and not great pacing.
Okay, now we're through the looking glass.
We are.
Are there examples of that in your fantasy reading history?
Well, to plug myself a little, I will be reading Brandon Sanderson's Oathbringer out next week.
The man who finished the Wheel of Time series.
The man who finished the Wheel of Time, so we're full circle. Haha, pun intended.
Oh, I just got it. Never mind, go on.
And I've read through some of Sanderson's other work, and he does this really amazing, intricate world building. It just takes a really long time. Like, the first book in the Stormlight Archive is, I want to say, about 1,000 pages.
All right.
So we're talking the length of the Lord of the Rings, roughly.
1,000 pages? Just 1,000? Oh, that's plenty. Okay, sorry, I'm looking at word count here.
Yes.
Sorry. Yes.
So
it's a lot of pages.
So to compare, I have the 1-volume edition of The Lord of the Rings at home, just to establish my cred a little more. And sure, it comes with appendices, but I want to say the 3 books themselves clock in at less than or about 1,000 pages.
Okay.
So, you know, and then there's like 100 to 200 pages of appendices at the end.
Lord of the Rings, I mean, like, in terms of storytelling, it moves along.
It does,
at a pretty good clip.
Except for when Tom Bombadil shows up.
Yeah, that's another video.
That is another video. The symbolism of Tom Bombadil.
But more or less, it moves at a good clip.
Right.
I mean, you're doing the world building.
Things are happening. And this is not to say that things don't happen.
Of course.
It's just that things take a while to happen. And at some point, it begins to beg the question, could this have been condensed down somehow? Even if you want to pack in all of this great world building and character work and mysteries about the world and why it exists the way it does. So it becomes this kind of question of maybe the word count or page count is justified, but does it have an impact on the storytelling?
Perfect. Now, okay, here's the question, the next question, kind of escalating.
Hit me.
And bring back to Song of Ice and Fire. Okay. Are there times when the length of A Song of Ice and Fire, do you think, negatively impacted the storytelling? Or just impacted it, or any notes you have on that? Because we're talking about that. Are those books too long? And are there places where you can kind of say, it is too long here, or it's just somehow inaccessible because of its length?
How hard is it to say Daenerys Targaryen should not be on Essos anymore?
That's a good point.
You know, it was a question that bothered us a lot in Game of Thrones. You know, when is she finally going to have an impact on the main story?
Right.
Versus when is she going to, like, how many lessons can she learn on Essos before she actually gets on a ship and goes to Westeros?
Sure.
So I think that is definitely a place where the length of it has kind of impacted the storytelling. You know, off the top of my head, that would be kind of
that's a common one.
You know, even the kind of the Martell subplot sometimes feels a little weird and thorny.
The subplot, or the Ironborn subplot.
Yeah, that too. You know, so that kind of, you know, turning off kind of can sometimes be, I think, a fair point to say. I
mean, my take on it, I think because of the sprawl of this enormous story, that it is justified in being as big as it is because there's a lot to tell. I mean, you do have an Daenerys story, you do have Jon Snow's story, you do have King's Landing in between, Old Town, Dorne, whatever. I mean, in my opinion, I thought the first 3 books, think it's a segmented problem. The first 3 books, I think, they do have world building, a lot of it.
They do.
They do have character building, a lot of it. But they also move. I mean, Bran is out that window pretty early on, like in the first 100 pages.
Yes.
Like Sansa's direwolf is dead. Not too long after that.
I would agree with you there.
They're in King's Landing, they're mixing it up, Jon's at the wall, Daenerys is killing her brother, having her brother killed.
Yep.
A lot happens, and I think he does a great job of having it all in those first 3 books. You got the world building, you got the dense character work, and you have the momentum. I think it slows down a lot.
That
in
is,
those latter 2
I
books.
will agree with you there. I will agree with you there that the first 3 books are better done.
Huge, but
They're
also
huge.
kind of worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, what do they clock in at? Maybe, I know they're not knocking on the door of 1,000 pages, not in the full-size paperback.
Oh, sure.
So
I find that word count's the better way to do it. Just because, I don't know, because I mean, pages you can space it out differently.
Right,
and
pages
it can be illusory.
It's a little looser.
But word count is a.
But word count
you can hang your hat on that.
You can hang your hat on word count. But I do agree with you that the first 3 books are better in terms of having that narrative momentum to kind of crib your term. And so I think the problem kind of may have come from the fact that, you know, he had all of these sprawling storylines,
right,
and then he had to start resolving them. And that might have led to the whole Feast for Crows, Dance with Dragons split.
I mean, if you ask me, a lot of that could have been cut. And I just want to, like, there are fans who say that the last 2 books, I mean, yes, they're a little slower, but they make up for it because they have those character development and world building, which they do. Like the section for Brienne is wandering through the Riverlands and she's seeing all this devastation. They're beautifully written and they have some lovely stuff.
That is fair to say.
Or the Dorne subplot. I mean, my response to that is always, okay, yeah, they have character building and character work, but so did the first 3 books, and they also had momentum.
Exactly.
So why can't you just have it all? And I mean, he proved he could. I think they are too long and they're not too long. It depends what book you're reading.
That is, yes. I think that's a good way to put it.
I think so too.
Yeah, we'll have our cake and eat it too.
Exactly. I think we solved the question.
And they're lemon cakes.
Of course they're lemon cakes. Any other final thoughts?
I mean, maybe George R.R. Martin will see this and cut things down. That'd be great, just for my reading sanity, but somehow I feel like The Winds of Winter is going to be big.
There's no reason it can't be. I mean, it's up to him. Do whatever you want.
Do what you want.
This is just our take, or my take, I don't want to speak for you, on whether or not the books are too long. A pair of takes. Yep. What do you think? Agree? Violently disagree? Thinking maybe likely? Leave your comments, questions, wherever you want, and we'll get back to you later. Anyway, I'm Dan Selcke, editor of winteriscoming.net.
I'm Cheryl Wassenaar, editor of Culturess.
It's been a pleasure. Bella Margulis.
Oh, oh, oh!